So, Olena Prokopenko, thank you ever so much for allowing for the interview today. So to start with, what is the mood right now like in Kiev? Are people scared that there'll be an invasion sometime soon?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Tom. First of all, I'll probably divide the overview of what the Ukrainian highest leadership's moods are at the moment and what the moods of the society are. The political leadership seems to be remarkably calm, and perhaps it might seem like it underestimates the existing threat. National Security and Defense Council believes it is physically impossible at the moment to invade Ukraine, and the rationale behind this statement is that, according to the Ukrainian authorities' information, Russia has not set up a single assault group of troops which would allow for the preparation for the invasion. At the same time, it is not clear if the Ukrainian government has a contingency plan for each of the scenarios that are being considered as possible. As to moods in the society, there's of course a strong pressure of uncertainty and the possibility of a full-fledged war, exacerbated by a wave of false flag terrorist attacks across Ukraine, targeting schools, metro stations, trade centers, other public places. And of course, the lack of proper communication from the government side is not helping. And this, I don't know, inclination or the intention to calm people's panic may have an opposite effect. So if the government actually enhances its communication efforts, it would be very helpful, I believe. At the same time, there's very evident unity in the society, and probably I can only compare that level of unity to the Maidan and post-Maidan times. There's a clear readiness to stand up for Ukraine as necessary, and according to the latest polls, according to the poll conducted by the Kiev International Institute of Sociology, almost half of Ukrainians actually consider the Russian invasion as a real threat and a real possibility, and at the same time, over half of Ukrainians do not see President Zelensky as capable to ensure Ukraine's defense. So these figures, of course, are quite gloomy. NATO membership support is growing, and at the moment, it's almost 60% of Ukrainians who support Ukraine's membership in NATO, and 67% support membership of Ukraine in the EU. Ukraine's ability to counter Russian aggression, of course, very much depends on Western support still, but we need to remember that NATO membership and even receiving the NATO membership action plan depends not only on Ukraine's ability to meet the technical requirements, but also on multiple political factors, and we cannot exactly control for those factors. Therefore, I believe we should focus on the homework, on the reform progress, on what we can do at the moment.
Now, you mentioned NATO there, potential NATO membership. Obviously, yesterday we had US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg in basically rejecting Russia's demands once again. The written response by the United States, by NATO, handed over last night. And NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg has reaffirmed the Ukraine's sovereign right to choose its own path. But do you think the West is doing enough to help Ukraine? Because obviously Article 5 guarantees do not apply to Ukraine. And in the event of a military invasion, it would seem from a conventional assessment of the military strength of Russia and Ukraine, it would be quite an uneven fight. Does that concern you?
It definitely concerns us very much. As to yesterday's decisions, the written response of the US and NATO that Russia received basically reiterates the reactions to Russia's outrageous ultimatums that it heard before, and the Ukrainian government has supported this written response and stated that our position was actually reflected and considered, taken into consideration in this response. Russian leadership obviously knew its demands would be rejected largely, and this is exactly what happened, so no surprises there. And today we're seeing reports from both NATO and from Ukrainian armed forces that Russia is actually enhancing the buildup at Ukraine's borders and increasing shellings. So it appears that the escalation will continue, but at the moment it looks like it will largely take place through hybrid warfare, through information war that has been going on for 8 years now, or actually much longer, through energy war, means through bomb threats that we have witnessed for the past 2 weeks. As to the large-scale invasion, it still seems to be very costly for Russia. Some experts estimate that about 50% of the Russian army would have to be engaged in this operation, in this invasion, if Russia aims not only to occupy but also to control the whole of Ukraine for some foreseeable future. And as much as the Russian leadership seems to publicly underestimate the sanctions package that has been put on the table as a possibility in case of invasion, I believe they still realize how those sanctions will hit the economy and Vladimir Putin personally and his closest allies. So I believe that I'm inclined to believe that the West will not let Ukraine return to the Russian sphere of influence and will not abandon Ukraine in case the worst scenarios play out. However, I'm concerned that some compromises may actually take place and they will slow down and reduce the scope of Ukraine's defense cooperation with NATO, with the US, with other Western partners. And therefore, it is very crucial that Western partners of Ukraine stand strong and resist the temptation of those compromises, and that they stand united to support Ukraine's security and global security, because this is what it is about at the moment. Yes.
So do you think then, I mean, obviously you mentioned potential compromises in some kind of worst case scenario, the US or NATO and Russia coming to some kind of grand bargain, which maybe suits NATO and suits Russia, but maybe doesn't suit Ukrainians. Are you concerned that the Ukrainians are not in the room when they should be, perhaps from your view, when it comes to these talks?
This is one of the key concerns that we have, and I fully agree that all negotiation platforms involving meaningful participation of Ukraine, particularly the Minsk format, the Normandy format, are basically gone. They are sabotaged by Russia, and they are therefore ineffective. Just yesterday, we saw how the Normandy advisors meeting did not yield any results. This means that we should, on the one hand, demand our place at the table and demand that no decisions are taken regarding Ukraine without Ukraine, but also we should negotiate through our Western partners and strengthen our international partnerships to make that happen. And of course, the best way to do that is by demonstrating that Ukraine itself is a reliable partner and to enhance our own Euro-Atlantic integration efforts. As I said before, we need to focus on what we can control, on our homework, on the reform progress, on ending political persecution, on reforming our defense sector, on accelerating anti-corruption, judicial and security service reforms. This is what will make us a much more attractive partner and will help us make the most of what the West can do for us. And of course, on the side of international partners, in terms of how our transatlantic support could be strengthened, international community should adopt the legislation envisaging personal sanctions against Russian leadership, against its defense sector, its banking sector, and of course the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. In case of further aggression against Ukraine, Western partners should also significantly increase the defense and cybersecurity assistance to Ukraine as a country on the front lines of democracy, fighting one of the largest and strongest armies in the world. Furthermore, it is critical that NATO expand its presence in the Baltic states and in Poland, and offer Ukraine clear prospects of receiving a membership action plan, and eventually NATO membership, conditioned on very specific and tangible reform deliverables that will benefit both Ukraine and its international partnerships.